Can you hear me whisper? I said, she's a real pain in the ass. I don't like working with her. Poisons.
I also think that I need to explain to people what it means, and I can't say it correctly ever. Perfluoroalkyl substances, right?
Per and poly, fluorinated alcohol.
Fluorinated
alcohol substances.
Alcohol is the part I have trouble with, substances.
So it's a carbon. It's one, at least one carbon molecule connected to one fluorine.
Right.
That's a PFAS. Now you can have multiple carbon, like 8, which would be C8, which is Teflon, or you can have 5. You can have any number.
And then I think as a non-scientist, the two things that are really important for non-scientists to understand is that the bond is really, really strong. So thinking back to your high school chemistry, which for me is literally 1988, that bond doesn't dissolve or break easily. And that's why they're forever chemicals. And that's why they work so well to do many things, but why they're so dangerous. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing, as a non-scientist, that people need to understand is that it's a family of chemicals, as she said, per and poly substances. So we're not talking about one chemical that is easy to test for just the one. It is a family of how many would you say?
15,000 and counting.
Yeah. So that means that it's complicated. And that means that testing and understanding the problem is complicated, and that solving the problem is complicated for that reason.
But the reality is these chemicals, even though there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them, as you said, they're in the same family, and they poison our bodies in the same way. So regulating them as a class of chemicals rather than one by one is the thing to do. And we need to regulate them out of our lives. We have to turn off the spigot, stop producing them, stop allowing products to be made with PFAS. And then we have to be realistic about the PFAS that's in our environment and say, look, we have to keep it out of our water. For instance, landfills.
Right.
Landfills are a place where PFAS concentrate in the garbage soup, also called landfill leachate.
Right.
That stuff needs to be treated on site, meaning you can't destroy this chemical bond, but you can filter out sometimes a large percentage of these chemicals.
Right. The last thing I would say about when I think of PFAS too, looking at the overarching problem, and this is something you've said many times, Laura, is that we can't be fooled by corporations who are saying, it's everywhere. We're not going to be able to solve the problem. Just put up with it. Less poison is better than more poison in this instance. So it's really important that we pass rigorous laws and regulations, that we test for the whole class of chemicals, that we really figure this out in a comprehensive way, and that we not give up just because it's hard. And that we understand that every bit of progress we make is worth making when it comes to this class of chemicals.
That's exactly right.
Well, I learned it from you, so it makes sense that it's right.
Sewage sludge often contains harmful chemicals. Get rid of the often, get rid of the probablys, always in our work. Just get rid of those qualifiers.
We really can say always.
We can say, it's like, and you can, and you don't even, they contain, sewage sludge contains.
Plastics are always toxic.
That's
sewage
right.
Sludge is always filled with thousands of dangerous chemicals. Landfills and incinerators are always polluting.
So the bad guys want us to use those qualifiers so they can say, because it was, this thing happened over there.
If we ran it well, it wouldn't. But it's always, that's why we focus.
More than they do.
Yeah. Well, they don't want to admit it.
No, they don't want to admit it. I eat organic food as much as I can because there are USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, has regulations around what you can call organic if you have an organic label. And one of the practices that's prohibited is using sewage sludge, an unwanted byproduct of wastewater treatment, as a fertilizer. And sewage sludge contains forever chemicals, always and reliably. So by eating organic, you can limit your exposure to PFAS.
Likewise, I try and buy organic cotton towels. I try and use cleaning products that are as non-toxic as possible. Avoid plastics also, wherever possible, especially in food and drink. No clothing that's been treated or materials that have been treated for, if something says it's stain proof or grease proof or waterproof, those are all red flags. Couches, and I don't have carpets. I think, like those, anything you can do to reduce your chemical load in general and avoid plastics in general and avoid breathing in microfibers.
Another really important thing to do is PFAS can enter groundwater, or if there's a surface water source in your town, it can have forever chemicals in it. So contact your water department if you're on a public water system and ask them, if you don't know, talk to me about PFAS and how much PFAS is in our water. And if you have a private well, you live in a rural part of the country.
Which I have a private well.
Right. Yep. So you can have your water tested.
Yep.
Just this year, the US EPA passed a national standard for public drinking water systems of 4 parts per trillion. Now, what that means is there is no safe level. It's a very, very small concentration. In fact, there's something called a maximum contaminant goal level, which is 0 for PFAS, because there is no safe level. So have your water tested, and there are ways that you can address PFAS if your water does contain these terrible chemicals. And usually, it comes from somewhere. It's not natural. These are synthetic chemicals. They're not natural in the environment. So it's come from sewage sludge. If you're near a military base,
near a landfill,
or a landfill, it's probably a good idea to test your water.
Yeah, and so also testing your water or your soil, if you think there's a reason that there might be PFAS contamination, most definitely test your soil too. You should probably test your water anyway, which, there's an expense there, which is frustrating. You want to make sure that you have a narrow test, because there are thousands of chemicals you could test for, right? So they're going to ask you, what do you want to test for? I test for lead, 1,4-dioxane, and PFAS. And that way, I feel like I'm getting, if it's something's coming out of a landfill, the 1,4-dioxane would show us that. And then PFAS, because it's what I'm most worried about. And then lead is also often a precursor of other chemicals coming down the pipe.
Maine, the state of Maine, Maine's Department of Environmental DEC.
They're DEP.
Right? Are they DEP?
I believe Maine is DEP,
Yeah. So anyway, their environmental department in the state of Maine has some good stuff on their website about how to test the water, what to look for, all of that.
Yeah. It's hard. It depends on, are you looking at it from an economic standpoint or more of a public health standpoint, or how about but what if we got rid of all of the subsidies for the petrochemical industry?
Oh, now you're talking.
Because if you get rid of all the subsidies for the petrochemical industry, a lot of the plastics, which most PFAS are made to use in plastic fibers or other plastic materials, they would suddenly not be the most cost-effective, or cheapest product to buy. So a lot of factories would shut down and stop making a lot of these chemicals and a lot of the plastic materials, like a nylon rug or a nylon covered couch, right? That's fabric, is plastic. They would not be making those things anymore if they didn't have the subsidies. So I think that might be one that I would go for.
Interesting.
Yeah. What would you do? That's off the top of my head. But
PFAS are human-made chemicals. I can't say your great-grandmother, because I don't know. There's some youngsters there. Great-grandmother might actually
our
have
great-grandmothers,
But my grandmother, and certainly my great-grandmother, was not exposed to any PFAS, right? So these chemicals were made in the 40s. They weren't really put into products until the 1950s. We can live without them. So I would take PFAS out of production. I wouldn't let consumer products and manufacturing products, whatever, be imported to the United States if they contain PFAS. This is not an essential chemical. And in fact, there's been some very good work out there that talks about a framework where we're rid of PFAS. And certainly in our country, we could do that. And are there essential uses for PFAS? We'll consider them one by one, but across the board, we can get rid of these chemicals. They are not essential in our everyday lives.
You just ban them.
ban them. An unknown fact. Hey, PFAS has a really good singing voice.
PFAS has a mustache. One of my favorite facts about PFAS, and again, this is something I learned from Laura, is that while there are many products that have PFAS in them in trace amounts, and while we should be worried about things like paper packaging that's covered with, they use PFAS to create a coating on, the main sources of PFAS, the primary sources of PFAS, are a few sources. Landfill leachate that gets into sewage sludge, the firefighting foam. Like, there's a few places where most of this PFAS contamination is coming from. And I think that's important for people to think about, that it's not, it is everywhere, but the real mother load of PFAS is coming from a few places.
Sewage sludge, landfills,
and firefighting foam.
Firefighting foam.
Yeah, where they're
in the manufacturing facilities, of which there's only, I think there's under 10.
Yeah, so
they're not. People aren't making PFAS all over the country.
Exactly.
DuPont, a couple big companies.
Saint-Gobain.
We're not putting tens of thousands of workers out of business.
So
when we put PFAS out of business.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that's a really good one. We really can ban this the way Laura suggested, and when we're talking about how to handle this, and that it's a concentrated problem in some ways. The origins of it are a concentrated problem, even though the effects are diffuse.
Yeah. And one of the places to start is people don't always know that PFAS are also called forever chemicals. They are the same thing, and they're referred to as forever chemicals in the press, and we go back and forth on it, but they are the same thing. And that's important. And another thing that's really important is to understand they impact our health in a variety of different ways. PFAS can increase your cholesterol to alarming levels. Primary route of being exposed to PFAS is from the water you drink and the food you eat, but primarily water is what we know right now. And it can cause kidney cancer. It can affect your immune system so that vaccines are less effective, right? So it's like a serial killer that uses all kinds of different tools to create havoc and cause harm.
A garrote and poison and a knife and a gun. And
the whole thing.
Exactly, Yep.
Actually, I try not to drink water. Like, I want to be like the pilgrims and just drink beer.
Don't say that, because she's trying to get...
I know. She's like, I have to edit so much because of you guys.
Sorry. Go ahead.